This is a recording from a Sunday meeting of the BC Humanist Association in Vancouver. Humanism is a progressive worldview that, without supernaturalism, affirms our ability and responsibility to lead meaningful, ethical lives capable of adding to the greater good of humanity. To learn more about humanism and to support our work, visit bchumanist.ca and make sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and be sure to subscribe to the BC Humanist podcast. The opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect those of our staff or board of directors.
Well, good morning. The first thing I'd like to say is that this presentation is aimed at people who are not members of the Memorial Society. Those of you who are, I'd like to take this opportunity to ask you to make sure that you're on the email list for the Memorial Society, because many of us have been members longer than email has been around. And so if you would be good enough to phone the office, and the office number is on the brochures at the side, but it's also there. If you let them know what your email address is and your phone number, then we can get hold of you and tell you when the annual general meetings are and give you any other notices that are sent out. So that's my first message. Memorial Society BC, why it matters. Now, this is the problem we're faced with. The funeral industry is highly competitive, but it's also predatory, not only with itself bereaved. And there are, of course, many responsible and capable funeral directors, but the memorial societies exist to assist their members to deal with the fact that when you are bereaved, you are very vulnerable to being upsold on things you don't want. And there's no one right way to deal with the death of a family member or next of kin, but there is the right way to deal with the things you'd like to have happen, as the person who has died has preferences as to how they'd like to be remembered and how their body should be dealt with, and that's what the Memorial Society is there to help you with. So the Society then does that, and at the same time identifies reputable funeral service providers. We have contracts with funeral providers throughout the province. There are 30 different districts throughout the province. And we have identified funeral service providers who have agreed to give you their services at a price that is reduced from what you'd pay otherwise. And the Memorial Society also acts as a safe go-between between that business and you, in case anything isn't quite the way you'd like it to be. And so the office is much more likely to give you a sympathetic ear than the funeral provider themselves. The office is very good also at collecting data on which funeral providers are not doing a good job, and that helps us decide who to have the contracts with. So the objectives of the Memorial Society are to encourage members to pre-plan for their final arrangements. And I might say not to prepay. And the reason for that is when you prepay for something, you need to be there to be able to make sure that you get what you've paid for. And most of us aren't. I can say that with some reliability. Humanists know that they're not going to be there to make sure that things go the way they planned them to go. They have to leave written instructions, okay? So, but if you pre-plan, then when the time comes, the Society will help you get the services you need at the best cost for what you want. And the next thing is that you get to keep a reference record of those plans. And there's an arrangement form in the small brochure that's on the side table for those of you who like to write on real paper. And for those of you who don't mind writing on your screen, it's also online now. And so the reference record of the plans that you'd like to follow needs to be done in some detail, and then you need to give a copy of that to the office. They put that on file, but you also need to give a copy to, in fact, more than one person so that they know confidently what you want, and when the time comes, they don't have to worry about it or be influenced by the whims of the commission-based provider who wants to sell you things, mahogany caskets with with special handles and all that kind of stuff. So that we link you also with defined cost service providers, and in the purple, which is hard to read, to be the first number to call for the family. So when the family needs a funeral service provider, the first thing to do is to call the Memorial Society, and they will tell you who to call for the services that you need. And they will also give you access to the plan in case you don't have it, because it will be on file at the Society. So the MSBC, the Memorial Society, negotiates pricing with the service providers. They update those contractual arrangements often, which is why we don't publicize anymore the name of the funeral provider on the website. We ask you to call the Society so we can make sure that you get plugged into the right people. There's a long history for that. It provides 24-hour answering service to calls, and I'll tell you more about that in a few minutes. And it encourages people to have services that are affordable, that are dignified, simple, and compassionate. And that goes also beyond simple pricing. So the MSBC is a nonprofit consumer advocacy group, and its first loyalty is to its members. That's the kind of organization you want acting for you. Not somebody who's in business who says they have your best interests at heart, but you're never quite sure. It's a society under the BC Societies Act. It's been a society for 62 years now. I believe it started in a Unitarian church in Vancouver 62 years ago. And it contracts with providers throughout BC, and it serves Vancouver, the Lower Mainland, and all of the other regions of BC, including Vancouver Island, the Sunshine Coast, and all the way up the province. The organization has contracts, as I said, with providers. We make sure that the business ethics are observed. They guide the conduct of the way business is conducted with members. And as I said before, they prevent upselling because that's something you're very vulnerable to when you're emotionally wrought when somebody passes away, in spite of the fact that humanists pride themselves in being based on reason, emotions. And the choices you make very often, first, are based on your emotional response, secondly, on reason, and sometimes the reason takes a while to kick in. So it's always, it's there, but it's always there at the beginning. So MSBC, as I said, also deals with complaints, concerns, and misunderstandings for you if you have them. There aren't a lot, but they do happen from time to time. You pay a one-time membership fee, and the way it takes place is a $40 fee, one time only for each person. So there's no family membership. You're supposed to die individually. And so it's very individualistic, in other words. But the membership then is $40 per person. If you pay $50, you actually provide us with a bit of a donation, but you also get mailed one of these. Now, I happen to have some free ones here today, so I won't charge you for these here today, but that's what you get, or one of the things you get with the extra $10. There's also a records fee payable at the time of death, and there's a discounted cost provided by the provider under the contract that we have with them. So again, at the bottom, the society is part of a socially positive movement to assist you at your time of need. And that's something that is worth a lot. Why should you take out a membership? Well, it gives you peace of mind, both for you and the family. I can tell you that it is very useful to have that. I'm not sure if everybody in the room has had to deal with the death of a loved one, but it's very comforting to know that that part can be dealt with in a straightforward fashion. It defines and records specific wishes of the deceased, and that's what that form was for that I mentioned. And it's here. It makes it easier to carry out those wishes. And that's important too, because then you know that you're doing what your next of kin really wanted. Are we providing the cheapest service? Well, in the Lower Mainland, I can say with confidence, not quite, because there are it's a cutthroat business, and there's a lot of providers that attempt to provide a cheaper service, but they don't provide all the other things we provide you with. And so We don't seek the absolute rock bottom cheapest provider or cheapest price, but we get the best price we can for the kind of things we think you need. And we give you quality at a competitive price, and those contracts are regularly updated, often on an annual basis, to make it work well for you. So how do you make it work? You join the society through the website with a one-time fee, or you send in the form I've provided you with here. You file your arrangement plan with the Memorial Society office and with close family members. That's important because when the time comes, you don't want them fighting over what this should be done. You want them to know what you want, and then there's no argument. When the member dies, the next of kin calls the MSBC toll-free number. That's the first thing you call, as I said earlier. And you get the preferences, you get the phone number of the current contracted provider. And that's the number that I showed you at the very beginning on the very first white slide. So you'll get the office during the daytime, and the weekends and evenings you'll get an answering service. So why call a society? Some of this is a bit repetitive, but we're coming at it from several different directions to make sure that you understand what it's all about. You call a society because the members then get the contracted price and service. If you call the funeral provider first, they may decide that you're not a member, even if you are, and they'll charge you more and not tell the society about it, and then things break down. It ensures service. If the member calls outside of business hours, they're asked to call again during regular hours to confirm that everything's in progress, and the office then faxes the provider. The most important thing to get going is that often care homes require the removal of the body of the deceased within 2 hours. Now, that means they need to know. Otherwise, the body gets sent somewhere that you don't want it to go. And that affects a significant number of people also in hospital. And the custody of the body can be a problem if you don't let them know what's supposed to happen. This is all rather macabre, perhaps, in a way, but it's really quite important to realize that. And contact information for the family has to be available from the care home. So there's a $35 record fee is payable at the time of death through the provider. This is part of the 3-point control system that we have to make sure that the provider gives you the service that you're due, that the society knows that that's taken place, and that you get the price that you're supposed to get. But if the member phones the provider directly, as I said before, then the contract price may not be honored, and the society may lose one of its sources of revenue, which is a small source, but nevertheless it is a source, and the likelihood of being upsold is greater. So that's why there's these controls in place. So what if there's a prepaid plan with another provider? And this, of course, does happen because many people think that's the best way to prepare. The funds will be accessible to you by law, but the final cost could well be different because that other provider may be able to justify that they're not able to provide the service for the agreed price. But the money nevertheless will be available to you. What happens if the call of the society is during regular hours? Well, then the member's funeral preferences will be immediately made available to the next of kin. And if you call a society outside of regular hours, that is when it's taken by the answering service, then the member's preferences will not be available to the next business day of the society. But the important thing is that the body will be dealt with by the people you want to have deal with it. And that's important to make sure it happens. As I said, the body will be removed by the contracted service provider to the safekeeping of their facilities, and the next of kin can then make the necessary arrangements with the provider. So what are your preferences? Do you want to go out in a blaze of glory? Do you want to be buried in the Strait of Juan de Fuca in your gold-plated Cadillac? Or do you want to be given a simple cremation with no ceremony? Or do you want anything else in between? Would you prefer the maximum? Do you prefer the minimum? What matters? If you don't let the family know, then it leaves them in a bind. I might also say at this point that leaving the family with instructions that you don't want a ceremony may in fact not be the best choice. because the family needs to know, needs to be able to get together and grieve and celebrate your life. My grandmother made that choice, and it made it quite awkward for the family because they really did want to get together. And she wanted it to be simple, and she, in fact, went a bit further than she should have gone in that area. So when there was a bit of a gathering, my folks felt a little bit uncomfortable because they were doing what she didn't really want. But they knew why she didn't really want it, so it was all right in the end. But it's important to know what you want. It's also important to think about your family when you do that. And that's why the plan is there. Do you want it to be religious or secular? Well, this set of slides is created for all groups. In this particular case, with this group, that's already decided. But how do you want your family to celebrate your life? That's not a religious question. That's a human question. Do you want to have a ceremony you believe you are due? You happen to be associated with police force or the military, or you're a member of the royal family. That's anybody's problem here, but do you figure you're due something more than the minimum? Basically, you can say what your preferences are. I guess you probably can't have a royal burial if you decide you want it, but the point is that in the plans you need to describe what you want. Do you want a ceremony at all? As I've said, there's no one right way, but think about that last one, about the ceremony idea. Do you want cremation or burial? Cremation is overall the least expensive. It's also becoming of concern because it means that things are emitted into the atmosphere that we don't want to go there. And a lot of crematoria aren't completely fitted with scrubbers to make sure that, for instance, mercury from amalgam fillings is not vaporized. But mercury fillings are becoming less and less popular, so the problem is disappearing. But cremation is the overall least expensive. It allows your family to schedule a memorial service or celebration at a convenient later date. That is terribly important to a family these days where the relatives are scattered across the world. In other words, a person dies, you make the arrangements, and then you say, we're going to have the ceremony at a time of the year when that person can be remembered in the most beautiful way. It might be next week, it might be 6 months away. The person's died. You have your ceremony when it works for you when you use cremation. Regular burial may require embalming, which costs you more money, and a decision for an open or closed casket during the service. And I'm not sure whether you've ever experienced a funeral where there was an open casket, but I have to tell you that I personally found it very disturbing because I wanted to remember the person as I remember them alive. And there's some very good cosmeticians out there at funeral homes, but that's my opinion anyway. So if there's no embalming, then the time is of the essence, and the disposal of the body needs to take place quickly. And of course, there are some cultures and religions that want you to do that the next day. Other options. So there's green burial, which requires renting a plot for 25 years, burying the body in a shroud in the earth. It's now available in Victoria. I think there's a second provider over there providing that. Promession. Anybody who's a chemist here will know what freeze drying is all about. It's a little bit, it's freezing instead of cremation, but the residue is actually it's similar. You get a powder, and it's been developed in Sweden. It is coming in. It's not available, I believe, in this area or even in Canada at this point. Resomation. Again, if anybody's done any kind of biochemistry studies at the university will remember what happens when you put, for me, it was a rabbit muscle in the base. It dissolves nicely, and that can be that can take place. It's now available in Toronto, and there are others. 90% of the BC population opt for a simple cremation. and it's even higher in Victoria. BC is the highest in Canada, and as you probably also know, BC has the highest proportion of people who are secular in the country. You can request whatever you want in terms of the ceremony, whether it's elaborate or simple. And the question is, on the arrangement form, what kind of, how would you like your life to be celebrated? Is there to be music? Some people don't mind whether there's music or not. I personally, as an amateur musician, think this is valuable. What kind of music would you like? Is it to be live or recorded? How much and when? Are there musicians in your family who could be called upon either for free or employed? Musicians don't exactly make a large living, so I encourage you not to take advantage of your relatives who are musicians. I happen to have some. Will there be a reception? A reception or party is optional. I attended a number of funerals in Winnipeg before I moved here. One year in particular I'm thinking of, and one particular service, one particular ceremony was simply an afternoon tea party. It was a colleague of mine at the university, a zoologist, who died, and he wanted all of his friends to get together and reestablish contact with each other. And by the way, remember him, but remember him as a pro-social individual who wanted to bring his friends together. Is the party going to be with food? Where might it be held? Should you worry about it? Well, probably not, because the circumstances change. But catering costs can be substantial, and considering the pricing for simple disposition of the body in the Vancouver area, the party will cost you more than the cremation, very likely, or of the same order. Other important considerations, which is what this little booklet here is all about, and it's much more comprehensive than what I've got here. Have you made a will? Have you put together an advanced care plan? Have you arranged for power of attorney to be vested in someone who is responsible, someone you trust? Have you filled out your organ donation card? And there are pages and pages of things to consider that are important in here. It was put together by one of our board members a few years ago. So join the Memorial Society if you're not already a member. There's the number again. There's the website. The office in Vancouver is on Broadway. It's east of Oak Street and west of Cambie on the south side of the street. See me after the meeting. Well, I'm expecting that here you'll find it's most convenient to go to the website or use the form I've presented, but certainly you can see me later. But don't put it off. As some wag said sometime, none of us gets out of this alive. So it really affects every one of us that we need to make sure we have a plan, and having it recorded for the family means that the arrangements are what they ought to be. And that's a white slide at the end again. So that's the end of my first presentation, and I'm very happy to take questions on this for a few minutes.